ain't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's your boy Ernie, the Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Also, if you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap that notification bell so you don't miss out on any videos. And if you enjoy said video, hit that like button. It really helps the channel out. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about NYX #2, written by Jackson Lanzig and Colin Kelly, with art by Francesco Mortarino, color by Raul Angelo, and letters by Joe Sabino. This issue primarily focuses on Laura Kinney, aka Wolverine, and kind of taking her in this new direction that is also putting her back in familiar territory. For those unfamiliar with the character of Laura Kinney, she made her debut in the original NYX series back in 2003 in NYX #3. And while I will go ahead and tell you right now, if you are thinking this is the original Laura Kinney, this actually is not the original Laura Kinney. There's kind of a lot that was going on there, but the long and short of it is the Laura Kinney in question in this particular issue is a clone of the original Laura Kinney because of some shenanigans that happened. As a matter of fact, I'm just gonna say, check out this video or playlist up here. It's a lot, but just know that the original Laura Kinney is actually dead. She died in some of the latter issues of Jerry Duggan's X-Men. This was a different Laura who was resurrected on Krakoa back before they realized maybe they should confirm character deaths before they resurrect people. But the long and short of it is, she is no less Laura Kinney than the original, and she has maintained the persona of Wolverine, and she still has all of those memories of the original Laura Kinney, minus the whole time in the vault with Synch and Darwin. That said, she still has those memories of the early days of NYX, and coming from being a teenage girl who was getting caught up in all kinds of suggestive and not okay situations to becoming a full-blown superhero. She is out there in these streets trying to save all of the mutants who are disappearing, largely unhoused teenage mutants, all of whom seem to be falling prey to a mysterious figure only known as Mr. Friend. We don't really know who Mr. Friend is at first. He was only really first teased in NYX bonus page that you had to scan the QR code to see. And while technically it didn't really give us a whole lot of information, all we knew is he was taking random and sundry mutants off the street. And we know he's a human. He seems to have some vested interest in mutants for one reason or another. He seems to be a human who thinks that mutants are quite useful. Whether or not he actually likes mutants at all is a whole other story altogether. But I'll go ahead and tell you right now, Mr. Friend is not actually Mr. Friend. If you don't want to know any more beyond this point, I will just simply say the issue is great. You should totally check it out. It is a case study on who Laura Kinney is as a character and as a person, and also showcases exactly how and why Laura does not want to work with anyone. She doesn't want to be a part of a team, and let's be clear, NYX is not a team book by any stretch of the imagination, but it is just a book that is going to showcase various different characters trying to get stuff done or just live their lives in New York following the Krakoan era, but also at the same time is also going to show you how maybe Laura might change her mind about that whole thing. Right now, Ms. Marvel is investigating Mr. Friend and the missing mutants and the quotey fingers Krakoan, who is a part of 3K, who we also know is actually the former X-Man Hellion. That is no secret. It's the worst kept secret in comics, if I'm being brutally honest. But yeah, that's basically what this book is about, and I think it does a really good job. Colin and Jackson do a really good job of really selling you on those old NYX vibes, but doing it in a way I think that's better than the previous NYX series, improving upon that formula. So yeah, I think it's a great book. You should totally check it out. That said, I'm gonna spoil the shit out of this book. Anyway, Mr. Friend is none other than Mojo. Now, this is a big deal if for no other reason than in the recently released Ms. Marvel Mutant Menace and mostly issue 2, they had a whole thing that was dealing with Ms. Marvel encountering Mojo. And while none of that is really referenced in this particular instance, just the fact that Ms. Marvel is in yet another book where Mojo is showing back up, I think is very telling. We might actually see some callback to that series that was written by Ms. Marvel actress, or rather co-written by Ms. Marvel actress Iman Vellani. This book does a really fantastic job of kind of leveling Mojo up a little bit. For those who are unfamiliar, Mojo is a character who originally was intended to be a Doctor Strange villain. Yeah, that guy, the guy who uses TV and ratings, interdimensional television and ratings, to fight his enemies, to enslave the X-Men and make them, sing for their supper more or less, using them to boost his ratings into the stratosphere. And well, technically this is not necessarily news. He's talking about how he is powered by belief. Well, it's kind of funny how that all plays in, because once again, this guy was originally meant to be a Doctor Strange villain, but ultimately became an X-Men villain, or rather New Mutants villain, then later X-Men villain. That said, magic works not that differently. And a matter of fact, in the Marvel Comics universe, magic is largely based on belief, and also so is the power of deities. It's all based on faith and belief in not just oneself, but how other people perceive you. And what they kind of did with this is that in Mojo world, Mojo is powered by ratings, and that is just another form of belief. The entertainment of other people empowers him to levels that can make him a whole problem for the X-Men. And in this case, he's not using television, at least not directly. What he's doing is, through Mr. Friend, he is building up the belief of mutants in him, that he is doing them a solid, that he is helping them find their place in the world, but also at the same time, he's taking something from them. And ultimately what this all leads down to is that he is pretty much the person who is behind the mutant growth hormone drug that's running roughshod in the Marvel Comics universe right now. And he is basically creating a super version of it, and he's using a lot of the mutants that he's taken in off the streets in order to manufacture that mutant growth hormone, extracting them from the people who he takes in. But before that, Mr. Friend has become a legend among mutant kind, and that is why you may recognize he looks a little different here, and he seems more powerful here. He's able to overpower Wolverine in this, to the point that even she has to cut and run. And while I know I just kind of made a Wolverine pun here, I'm gonna own it, because I thought that was actually pretty cool. I'll take that. Just gonna pat myself on the back for that one. The fact that Mojo is here makes things pretty interesting to me, because we're taking a villain that is not normally in these types of stories, especially for NYX. NYX has never been one of those books that's really dealt with grandiose villains. It's usually more of a down-to-earth affair. So the fact that we're going Mojo here is kind of a statement of intent that this book is not going to be your standard NYX title. And I like that. I like how this is being played here. A lot of the other characters don't really get a whole heap of a lot to do. Ms. Marvel gets to have some back and forth with Lara for a little bit, which I think is fine. It's basically very similar to the conversation they had in the previous issue, where Lara was pretty much telling Kamala to kick rocks. She doesn't want to be a part of her little team of not champions. And Anole, is there just in the background. But I mean, once again, we got to see a little bit of Anole in the previous issue, and we also don't really get to see much of Sophie Cuckoo, except for her dancing with Anole at one point. But the character Prodigy doesn't get much to do either, but he does get to have an interaction with Lara that, while she's trying to impress a new mutant character by the name of Local, a guy whose power is incredibly strange. It seems like his power is pretty much all over the damn place. He seems to have the ability to control things like traffic lights and subway trains and manipulate how they work or function on some levels. Like, he taps into the power grid of New York. So once again, it's never really explicitly stated exactly what his power is, but we just see him use it a lot in some really interesting ways, which makes me wonder, like, man, a guy with this kind of power, like, I mean, yeah, it might seem small at first, but kind of a big deal, I would say. But that said, yes, she's trying to impress this guy so that he will introduce her to Mr. Friend. And while they're breaking into ESU, the very same ESU where Orcus had pretty much set up an entire mutant and alien chop shop, basically they're breaking in to, prove some loyalty, that, they're going to extract some items from the ESU campus and bring back to Mr. Friend. Now, that said, yes, while this is going on, she runs into David, who, if you don't remember, in the previous issue, it was revealed that David, aka Prodigy, works as a professor at ESU now. It seems like this is going to be the way that Prodigy is going to be drug in to the shenanigans that are going on with Wolverine and Ms. Marvel and Sophie Cuckoo and Anole, because they're working together on this whole thing. Yeah, I don't know. This issue, it's not necessarily doing anything like super duper mega ultra crazy, you know, or whatever, but it's doing, I think, what it needs to do to get the plot going. We're in issue 2. We've seen who the big bad is by this point. And, you know, sometimes these sort of books, they usually have this really bad habit of trying to either keep the villain a secret for a while or try and play the villain as mysterious. This book is not doing that. Mr. Friend is pretty much unmasked almost as soon as you see him. He is literally just a puppet for Mojo, and I'm here for it. I think it's cool. All that aside, though, yeah, there's not really a lot of much else here. I mean, I think for older NYX fans, like if you're a fan of the original NYX books, there's a couple, actually kind of multiple references to NYX character Keaton, who was a major player in that original series, and both herself and Laura Kinney became incredibly close over the course of that series. So yeah, I mean, there's that, but beyond that, in the callbacks to Ms. Marvel, Mutant Menace, which, to be fair, even those are kind of minimal. It's really just the fact that Mojo is present and Ms. Marvel was the last person who ultimately dealt with him. That's really the only reason why it's more of a callback to that. None of exactly how or why he's on Earth right now really speaks to any of that, outside of the fact that Mojo seems incredibly invested in mutants right now, more than he probably ever has been, because of everything that happened with Fall of X. The fact that the X-Men had their own mutant island, lost said mutant island, are now, back on Front Street right now. That is pretty much what's attracted him to the X-Men again. He wants to take the situation and manipulate it as much as humanly possible, the way that Mojo always wants to do. Mojo is a very simple creature. He is not a very complex character, at least not in comparison to a lot of other characters. So the fact that he's doing this, it makes sense. It makes sense on paper. The fact that he's not, monetizing this in terms of like live streams and television is a little bit different. I think that's the one thing that's kind of like, oh, this is actually a step in a different direction for Mojo. While he does talk about TV and uses a lot of TV terms, he's still doing the same old thing. He's just doing it in a very different way. And I think that's a good thing. It's a good thing to see that kind of evolution from a character like Mojo. I actually want to commend Colin and Jackson for taking this direction with Mojo on this, because it's actually kind of a dangerous one when you think about it. The fact that Mojo is doing something different than what he normally would. That's a very easy recipe for disaster when you try to break the mold in that fashion. So I'm very curious to see what exactly they're going to be able to do with this. But yeah, all in all, I like it. I even like some of the callbacks to the Krakoan stuff in this, when they go to the nightclub where they bump into Local, and the sign on the outside of the building, the club, clearly is called the Danger Room if you go through the trouble of trying to match the Krakoan text, and how they do the whole thing with the bouncer. He basically says in Krakoan, respect this sacred land, which was one of the core rules of Krakoan. In typical Laura Kinney fashion, she doesn't respond by giving some callback. She just speaks Krakoan back and says whatever, man. And I thought that was kind of cool. I was actually like, the first two things I was kind of like, oh, this is kind of annoying, because this isn't fun stuff. This is just stuff that's like, it's pretty obvious. I didn't even have to do most of the, I guess, word key thing for the Krakoan text. When I saw that one of the first 5 letters was a D and an A, I was like, oh, this is the Danger Room. And when I went back and double checked, I was like, oh yeah, it's pretty obvious. And when I saw that the first 3 letters of what he was saying was RES, I was like, oh, he's saying respect the sacred land. And when I went back, that's exactly what he was saying. It was all stuff that was pretty obvious. The thing that Laura said was the thing I didn't actually expect, even though it is very on brand for her. But yeah, this book is great. It's great. Like I said, this book is doing what it needs to do. It's holding the attention of people, or at least it should be holding the attention of people who are X-Men fans, who maybe want a taste of something that's not exactly your typical X book. No more, no less.